I want to start with pitching. So it doesn't take much to watch a game and see players are bigger, they're stronger. Baseball has lowered or raised the mound 24 times or somewhere thereabouts. There are 146 guys throwing 95 plus. And I've said this before, is the sport is good when the batters have a shot. It's more activity, more base runners, more steals, first to third, second to home. There are so many big, strong kids throwing so hard now, John. When you played it with 6.5 strikeouts a game, now it's getting close to 9. Should baseball consider lower that mound just a skosh, give batters a fair shot?
I think you're on the right track. I think there's other ways to do it with some rule changes that would inhibit the ability to throw a multitude of pitchers per game, which everybody coming out of the pen throws 95 to 100. I think if you lower the strike zone, you've got a chance that both pitchers and hitters can attack a lower strike zone. Hitters can hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, but they can't hit it at the belt and above. So there are some variances that you can make to rule changes that would inhibit that what you're talking about and have some more action. If you limit the amount of pitchers that are on a roster, that's one way. If you lower the strike zone, that's another way. And then you would have to philosophically put your team together in a different way, and that would mean I would ask my starters to pitch a little bit more and less of the 5 to 7 pitchers per game. So no doubt the guys are throwing harder. Their stuff is dynamic. They spin it more. The injury rate's still going through the roof. That has not been addressed when they thought that this would be a better way to approach pitching. But to your point, I mean, if they allow the amount of pitchers and amount of guys to go up and down throughout a year, that's what you're going to see for the most part, taking advantage of the rules that are at the current level.
Baseball's very unique, where if Mike Trout bats 4 times a game and he's the best player on your team, the worst batter on your team can bat 4 times a game. It's hard to separate. Sometimes in baseball, average pulls down great. In basketball, your best player shoots 27 times. Your weakest starter shoots 2. Brady touches it 65 times. Your blocking tight end may not catch a ball. But in baseball, it's different. That often average, if you don't have somebody hitting in front of Trout or Ohtani. And I look at the Angels, and I look at the Nats, and I look at some of these teams, and I think, like Ohtani or Trout, it's a bad baseball team. That you're better served getting draft picks and players, and so you have a very even roster instead of a star, and you can't put the right guys in front of him. You can't afford the bullpen. You can't afford a good 3-starter. Mike Trout, to me, feels like, okay, Mike, you're loyal. It's great. You need to give yourself a shot and play with a better roster. What would you do if you were the Angels, where you have these 2 mega stars and not a lot else?
Yeah, it's a great question because they do have 2 of the best stars in the game, and you're seeing that the fruit is not being delivered at the right time. Look, it's always been about pitching for the Angels, and now it's been about hitting. Their pitching is actually better, but their hitting, they just can't score. And a lot of pressure on Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. When you think about what kind of trade you would have to make, well, let's just say Shohei Ohtani, which would shock the world and cause an earthquake, you would have to come up with a package that, to your point, would restock your organization both at the big league level and the minor league level. And I think those are the hard decisions that an organizations are trying to make. With the 2 added playoff teams this year, you would have thought that the Angels had a legitimate shot of making the playoffs and answering that question about Mike Trout and Ohtani. We need to see them in the playoffs. Unfortunately, it has not worked at all, and they don't look like they have a fighting chance. Who knows? Teams have gone on streaks already. We're dealing with the Seattle Mariners who won 14 in a row. But to your point, it's a valid one, and it's going to be one that they're going to have to cross pretty soon to figure that out.
Listen, there's certain teams we know why. Dodgers have an all-star team. The Yankees spent a lot of money. They have power and aces. The Mets are fascinating, where they've got 1 or 2 great players, but there's just, I watched them play the last couple of games at the series against the Dodgers on TV, and I'm like, I know the Dodgers have more talent, but even without Scherzer and deGrom, I feel like the Mets are as good or better than the Dodgers. How do you explain their success without Scherzer, without deGrom?
They've done a great job. They spent a lot of money. But they've done a good job of the money they spent outside of pitching. They've got some depth in their lineup. They don't strike out as much. They made some really under-the-radar moves to improve that lineup depth. And they have depth in their rotation. When you talk about deGrom not even throwing yet, and they're in first place, I think every Mets fan would sign up for that. The Mets are very deep, and they're legit. And the problem with the Mets has always been, can they get away from the injuries in their starting rotation? And there for a while looked like the same old thing, different players. But they've been able to sustain that depth and be able, with that lineup, put themselves in a great spot. Now, the Braves got hot. They won 14 in a row, put themselves back in the mix. So it looks like it's going to be a divisional race to the end. But the Mets, to me, are the best team they've ever had since I've been out of baseball and doing this on the broadcast side.
Listen, Aaron Judge is having a monster year. Right now he's got 1 year left on about 19 large, and he obviously matters a lot. I think because of his stature, his physical, size, he feels such like a Yankee. He feels like he should play for the Yankees. Good-looking kid, big size, home runs in a sport now that is very much about home runs and strikeouts. I don't know what the market is for him. Would you be concerned at all? He's had some injuries, John, in his career. He's now getting older. Could you sign him to one of these $3 or $4 million, $100 million contracts, or would you have to sleep on it?
I mean, that dilemma has always been there because of his size and the injury past. I think he's one of my favorite players to watch play the game. You root for a guy that big, that nice, that does everything the right way. I agree with you. It just seems like he's going to be a Yankee. But when you think about some of the things that have happened in the last couple of days, with Soto turning down that contract, with the possibility of a trade somewhere, or maybe, everyone points to New York when there's a young, dynamic stud that could replace, let's say, a great player in Aaron Judge. Look, the Yankees have been really good at keeping their farm system together and having a chance to win it all. They have to win it all soon. I mean, that's just part of their DNA. It was like the Dodgers, when they won it, they had erased that gap that they hadn't won a World Series in a long time. So however that goes about, I think it's going to play out. Aaron Judge should have a monster year if he stays healthy. And I believe they will work something out to sign there. But if not, I think a lot of things that you said are relevant because we value age. And believe me, don't get me started on age, because I think that's a hard thing to quantify universally. I think an age for one person is different than the age for another one. But I think his ability to stay healthy and on his feet at that height, playing a premium position, is definitely what people are going to look at for the length of the contract. Maybe not so much the average salary per year.
Yeah, pay him more on an average basis. All right, Fox, 7 Eastern, All-Star game at Dodger Stadium. It says here the last All-Star game at Dodger Stadium was in 1980. It is an absolutely beautiful stadium. As you know, you've pitched in it many times. By the way, how is it viewed as a pitcher? Did you like pitching there?
Loved it, especially at night. I don't know if the marine air has disappeared this year, but so the night air is much more difficult to drive a ball out of there. Ball jumps during the hot temperature in the day when it gets that way. It's a great stadium to pitch in. Look, I would flip-flop between San Diego and L.A. because you're guaranteed an all-star game. The weather's going to be great. Yeah, it's on the left coast, but, hey, I think every player, when they get to an environment, wants to know, A, they're going to play, the conditions are going to be perfect. So I don't think anyone would complain if they flip-flopped it, between those two cities.
7 Eastern, Fox. Good seeing you, bud.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.